Today we're going to do a quick overview on Bill H.R. 4883. We've asked some of the leaders in the rare earth industry to give us their opinions on this bill.
Our involvement is quite simple. I've had an opportunity to sit down with Congressman Stockman, who is from the Houston area in Texas, and his staff. And they were the ones that put forth the bill, obviously wrote it on his behalf, and I laud them for that. The bill neither hurts nor helps us, and I think it's very important in that it focuses the United States, Congress, the public on the problem of trying to stimulate a domestic rare earth program, especially for defense. The bill, as I said earlier, especially points out or requires that the Defense Department make every effort to purchase rare earth supplies from domestic sources. I applaud every effort to bring the issue of rare earth sustainability, rare earth production, domestic production to the forefront in American politics, because I do believe from my conversations, in Washington, that there is a real desire on everyone's part to have a reliable, long-term domestic source of rare earths, especially in applications related to defense.
Well, in looking at the bill you're talking about, I've come to the conclusion that it's the right idea, but it's being gone about the wrong way. The emphasis on thorium is what bothers me, because this is something that simply is not going to happen in any reasonable amount of time. So to peg a central refinery, which is critical to the furtherance of North American self-sufficiency, onto something like thorium use in reactors, to me, is too long a shot. And so what I hear here is the noise that comes out of places like Washington and Ottawa, like, we're for it until we're against it. I don't see any movement here. It's a great idea, but I think it was done the wrong way. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me now. I understand that. But thorium is not going to be a good driver for the future of Earth.
We're happy to share our thoughts on legislation that advances rare earth mining and technology in the U.S. And Bill 4883, we think, is consistent with the idea of advancing critical materials on U.S. soil. We should say, however, that we think that particular bill maybe is a little bit misguided, and I'll tell you why. Bill 4883 calls for a centralized refinery for thorium-bearing deposits, or REEs that are co-existent with high thorium content. And that's not always the case with heavy rare earth deposits, or any rare earth deposits for that matter. There's a particular deposit in U.S. soil that has high thorium content, and that's probably where the whole thing is generating from. I should say, however, that Bocan in particular does not have high thorium content. As a matter of fact, the Bocan Dawson Ridge deposit has fairly nominal or background levels of thorium and uranium. We're talking maybe 100 to 200 ppm. So, legislation that advances a centralized refinery that is designed to accept high amounts of thorium, which can be problematic, it just doesn't apply in the case of Bocan. And Bocan is, as we said before, the most advanced heavy rare earth deposit on U.S. soil. So, while we applaud the idea of 4883, we think that it's flawed to a certain extent. Okay, so by contrast, let me draw your attention to another piece of legislation that we think takes a broader approach to development of critical materials on U.S. soil and would cover deposits that have high thorium content and deposits that don't, including Bocan and others. And that piece of legislation is known as SB 1600 or SB 1600. That legislation is being sponsored by Senator Murkowski of Alaska. And essentially what it does, again, taking a broad approach, it says there's 20 critical materials right now that are threatening the advancement of the United States vis-a-vis China and other competitors at a world level, and that we need to get deposits to production as quickly as possible that have those materials. And so those materials obviously would include many of the rare earths, dysprosium, terbium, europium, yttrium, and so forth, and other materials. And what it says essentially, SB 1600, is that Murkowski is calling for a streamlining of permitting procedures to advance those projects to production as quickly as possible. So it's more of a blanket form of legislation that covers all forms of strategic minerals, all forms of strategic materials, and does not have sort of a myopic approach that just looks at rare earth deposits that are high in thorium. So again, we're going with the approach of 1600, and we hope that that piece of legislation will advance as quickly as possible.
Yes, I've been involved in the development and promotion of this legislation for over 6 years, and have worked very closely with the Thorium Energy Alliance on its development and promotion. Our position on this is that rare earths are obviously an economic and national security issue, and that what we have learned and what we're trying to educate legislators and policymakers on is that the rare earth market isn't a case of the free market, a level playing field, or the lowest common denominator, lowest cost producer of rare earths. It really comes down to a legislative regulatory disadvantage for U.S. and Western producers. What most people aren't aware of is that in the early 80s, the NRC and the IEAE put out new guidelines for source material. Now, source material is defined as uranium or thorium in any combination, in any ratio above 0.05. And what source material is the material that you would use to make nuclear fuel or nuclear weapons. So what happens is any rare earths associated with thorium are now completely unavailable to Western producers. And this is a disadvantage. This isn't just, not a level playing field or China playing hard and fast and using its monopoly advantage to strike down U.S. companies or Western producers. This is IAEA, NRC rules and regulations that basically prohibit U.S. and Western companies from developing high-value, heavy rare earth resources. Consequently, they can't compete. And until the U.S. or the West overcomes this regulatory problem and deals with it, no Western company is ever going to be able to compete with China.
So yes, U.S. Rare Earth is a U.S.-based, domestic, Texas-located mining and exploration company. We've got 22,000 acres of land. Our focus is primarily on exploration of rare earth elements, and the properties are located across Colorado, Montana, and Idaho. We received a recent approval, so I think there's a distance that we're developing between us and the rest of the competitors, because we are able to take a stockpile of material off our properties in Montana. That's been approved by the federal government, and it's about 10 to 12 tons of material. We believe these materials are heavily enriched in critical and heavy rare earth elements. Of course, we encourage the domestic mining, processing, and manufacture of rare earths and their related products because we see them as critical. If you take a look at who's on our board, it's clear we're patriots at a whole bunch of different levels, and we see the bill as helpful to allow less dependency on China and more self-reliance on American production and capabilities. We also think the economics are prevailing in that to the extent that we produce things in America, we can start to bring some manufacturing back here and not give away our IP, our domestically produced IP, for the simple fact that we can get materials somewhere else or procure materials elsewhere.